Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is David Easterbrook. Today I'm going to show you how to take a young nursery tree and transform it into a bonsai. Now, you probably clicked on this video because you want to learn how to make a bonsai for yourself. So today what we're going to do is I'm going to explain how to choose a tree for a bonsai and then how to make it into a bonsai. So this here is a dwarf conifer. It's a Norwegian spruce. It's called Picea abies Little Gem. And I just go around to the local nurseries at this time of year and look for, at this time of year, all the trees are discounted. So I look for a tree that's not too expensive, and preferably I try to find a tree that's in the back of the nursery that's been neglected a bit. As you can see, this tree is, there's a lot of dead branches, there's a lot of bare spots. A lot of people wouldn't buy it, but it's a tree that's been around the nursery for quite a few years, and it's got a nice thick trunk at the base. Before I bought it, I put my thumb under here and I felt it and I said, oh, that's a nice old tree here. It's probably been hanging around the nursery for 9 or 10 years. So I chose it because of that. Now, I think if it has enough branches, you can make a tree out of almost anything. So that's what we're going to do today. To start off with, to see what we're going to do with it, I'm going to slide it out of its pot. I'm not going to take all the soil off of it because I don't want the roots to dry out. And this isn't the best time of year to repot a bonsai tree. So we're going to take it out. We're going to look at the shape. We're going to remove just some soil around the root ball here just to see where the roots start. So we'll start by cleaning it a bit, getting some, revealing the bottom of the trunk so that we can find out what style of bonsai we can make. Because if you're making bonsai, the Japanese have codified a certain number or a certain amount of bonsai styles, and you really want to try to adhere to those styles to make a good quality bonsai. Now, if it's your first time, it doesn't have to be perfect. Let's not stress out when we're making a bonsai. It's really supposed to be a fun activity. You're supposed to enjoy it. So I don't want you to worry about, oh, what's going to happen if I, remove too many branches or if I kill it. No, you want to try to keep the tree alive. But anyway, it's a first attempt for most people, so I think you should be able to follow my instructions. As I say, first of all, we're removing soil around the base to try to find where the roots come from the trunk. Okay, sometimes the roots come out much lower than you thought, and so it's pretty hard to find what shape you can give to the tree unless you can find where the base of the tree is. Because when we go to repot it eventually, if we find out that the roots are 3 or 4 inches deeper, then our original idea is probably will go to hell. So you really want to try to find out how much trunk we have under this soil level to start off with. I'm not removing all the soil. I'm just removing the excess soil at the top, just to get down there. Most nurserymen tend to overpot the trees. They put them in too deep in big pots and then put soil around and on top of them. So that's why it's so hard to find the roots, because they're potted too deep into their pots. And that, as I say, can really send us for a loop when we're trying to make a bonsai out of it. So we really do have to get down there and find the right soil level. Now we're hitting the main roots. They're coming from the trunk. So I think we're going to be able to stop removing soil. We see that I've gained maybe 1.5 inches of trunk, and it'll give me an idea as to what shape I can give to the tree. So what I do now is once I've found the root level, is I'm going to just turn the tree around at different angles to see what shape or what's the best front and what I can do with this tree. So I'm turning it around here, just keep turning it around to find what is hiding inside of this tree. There's a nice big branch coming off up here that's pretty nice. Some of the branches have died inside, but I think I have enough to pull down to fill in the empty spaces in here. There's a strong branch here too, but it's not as large as this one. So I think this branch here, the tree starts off straight. We couldn't make a straight trunk because most of the parts that are following the straight trunk are dead up in here. So we're not going to use this part of the tree. So we'll remove that, and we're going to go up and follow this line up into here. So I'll start by removing some branches. Now with conifers, you don't really want to cut them all off completely. You want to leave them and then maybe remove the bark and create what are called gins. Gins are actually like snags in a dead tree. They're when branches die on wild trees, they stay on conifers. They'll stay on for many, many years. So that's what we want to create, is sort of a snag effect. So we're going to cut away some of the dead stuff, and then we're going to remove the bark on all of these branches that I just cut off and create a really nice looking snag in here. Okay, to do that, we'll just wrap our concave cutter around the branch and then take a pair of pliers. These are called gin pliers. They're made especially. Squeeze the living wood and then just pull. And the bark, because it was still alive, should just, it's like skinning the tree, should just come off like that. So now we're going to go higher, do the same thing a little bit higher. We're going to cut around. The reason why we cut around is we don't want all the bark to come off. If it comes off lower down, it could take off all the living parts and our tree would die, so we don't want that. So now I'm going to start removing some dead branches and living here to make a nice gin. A gin, as I say, is a dead snag, dead wood, and conifers, the dead wood can stay for many, many years on a conifer because they have resins inside the wood, and it's the resin that protects the branch from rotting. So even though it's dead, it won't rot for many years. So here you're squeezing all around, squeeze, 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 and then pull. Now, we don't do this on deciduous trees because deciduous trees are not resinous and the wood will rot within a matter of months or a year or two. So it's not worth doing gins, dead wood on deciduous trees, only on conifers. And even then, sometimes, if you have too much dead wood, it's not very pretty either. So, you have to sort of, at the end, we'll look at it and see whether we have too much. If we have too much, we can remove it, but it's easy to take it off, but it's very difficult to put it back on, if not impossible. You'd have to have very good glue to put them back on, so that's why I prefer to gin them all, to take off the bark, and then at the end, if I don't need them, I'll just cut it off. So here we go. So this is ginned now. Now I'm going to look at the other branches and see what I'm going to use. So gradually we're going to remove branches that are not very helpful to our tree. This one here is hiding the front of our tree. So this one will come off also, the one that was coming straight toward the front. It's coming out of a sort of a fork in the branches too, so it's not very pretty. So it had to come off anyway. Even if this doesn't end up being our front, it has to come off. So now we're going to remove this one that's way too low. And finally, this big one here. This big one here is not a very pretty branch. It's in the way, so we're just going to take it off. Okay, we're going to gin this. I'm not taking it off completely right now because, again, you don't want to go back and say, oh gosh, I removed the wrong branch. It looks ugly now. So you do it bit by bit and make sure that, you know, that you're not removing the wrong one. Okay, so over here, we're removing some more dead branches. These are too small to make into gins. They're just pretty useless as branches, so we don't need these. Okay, so we're getting there, folks. Now, we're going to clean up along this trunk here, see what we have that's good that we can keep. Bonsai is literally reducing a tree to its essentials, and that's what we're doing now. This branch here is completely dead. Whoops, yes it is. So it'll be removed. Too small to make into a gin. This one here is barely alive, not worth keeping. Now we're getting up into the upper part here. Now I'm going to be removing some crossing branches up in here. Now, this, we've got like two tops. We've got one here and one here. I think because it's a dwarf conifer, this tree, and grows very slowly, I want the height. So I'm going to keep the upper one, and we'll keep part of the lower one to make a very nice side branch, because there's a big empty space in here. So we have to fill it in. So we'll need quite a bit of foliage in here. Okay. So this one's been reduced here. Now, we're working our way up to the top. There's a lot of old needles that have accumulated. That's why a lot of the lower branches died, because they weren't getting any light. They were shaded out by upper branches, and then a lot of the needles fell and accumulated in these branches. So a lot of them just went and died. This one here is way too thick. So this one's going to come off. Again, we're whittling down the branches. The ones we don't need are coming off. And the ones we want to keep, well, we're just making sure that they're in the right place. You can never keep everything in bonsai, because a bonsai is really, it's an exercise in paring down and removing all the excess until you find the inner soul of your bonsai. So you don't want to have too many branches. You want to simplify, simplify, simplify. We've got too many branches in the back, so going to remove this one here and this one here. You don't want branches on the same level. At the most, you would keep maybe 2 branches at the same level. So you don't want there to be an excess of branches. First of all, it'll fatten up that part of the trunk. And you don't want trunks that have reverse taper. You want the trunks to get gradually more and more tapered, more and more narrow toward the top. So it's important that you don't leave too many branches in one spot. Whittling down some of the main branches. We don't need all of it. So I'm removing the parts I don't need of these main branches. Creating a bonsai is actually a process of elimination. Of course, in the beginning, it's hard to figure out what you need to keep and what you need to leave, but it comes with time. What you should do is sort of study pictures of bonsai and get used to identifying different styles. And from there, you can go on to create some pretty cool bonsai. So, yeah, it's the best way to learn to do bonsai is by studying pictures, studying examples, going to bonsai shows, and learning it from there. Some of these will actually bud out now that I've opened them up and the light will get in. Some of them will actually send out new buds along the old wood. Spruce aren't really known for budding back on old wood, but this is a dwarf variety of spruce. This is a dwarf Norway spruce. And so the dwarf spruces are much more liable to send out buds. The Japanese call dwarf conifers, or dwarf trees in particular, yatsu busa. Yatsu means 8 in Japanese. Busa means buds. So they mean that they tend to send out more buds than less. And that helps when you're creating a bonsai because you have more choice. The more choices you have, the easier it is to create your bonsai. It's a good thing to have more branches than less. Always a good thing. Got it cleaned up pretty well. We're back. Now we can see the living foliage. There was so much dead needles, little dead branches everywhere that we had to find out what was living, and we'll know what we have to work with. Well, the next step is going to be wiring it to give it a better shape. I'll explain the shape that we're going to give to it. Just cleaning up the bottom branches here. There was so many needles that fell in there that they accumulated, and the tree was actually trying to send out some roots into all of this chaff, into all of this accumulated foliage in here. So I'm actually cutting out some roots that grew into all of this old leaf litter inside the tree. This is what we have left. We might even reduce some of that even further while we wire. But I'm a proponent of more is better. I don't like to reduce it to the size of a popsicle stick. I don't think it's very appropriate for a bonsai. So really, I think it's preferable to leave more branches and more foliage, and then eventually, if you think there's too much as they start to develop and forming these plateaus, these foliage pads, if you think they're too thick, then you can start removing some excess branches. But it's always better to have more. It helps the tree to recover, and then eventually we'll remove a few. We're going to start here by wiring our main trunk. You always start by the main line of your tree, the trunk, and we're going to go from you have to use one wire to wire two branches together. So in this case, I can, because it's the trunk, I can either anchor the wire in the ground, or because this trunk is a similar thickness, I think I'm going to wire this fork here and go up to the top. So I'll need a pretty thick wire. Today we're going to be using copper wire. Now, why copper? Because this is a conifer, and with conifers, they're very elastic in a way. We can really move some of these branches around to our taste, and the copper gives us better holding power. The copper on this tree will let us really bend it if we want, and the copper is flexible because it was annealed. It was heated in a hot fire for about 15 minutes, and that softened the wire. But once the wire goes on the tree, it will harden up again and really hold those branches in place until it's removed. The question is, when do we remove the wire? Well, it all depends. There's no set amount of time. The wire will stay on anywhere from 2 months to generally about 18 months. And on thick branches or on the trunk, generally it stays on longer. Near the top, because the sap runs to the top and it's much stronger than the bottom branches, there the wire will be embedded in the trunk much faster. Now, it's not the wire that grows into the tree, it's the tree that grows into the wire. So the healthier your tree is, the more fertilizer you give it, the more sun you give it, the faster it's going to grow, and the faster it's going to grow into the wire. So it's really hard to tell you when to remove it. What you do is you just look at it from time to time, and if you see the tree is growing into it, it's sinking into the bark of the tree, then that's the time to remove it. All right? So I'm going to grab some wire here, and I'm going to show you how to wire. This here is, maybe I should have even brought out thicker wire, but this here is copper, and it's a size 12. So 12 is pretty strong. It's but the wire should be at least, the copper wire, at least 1/3 the thickness of the branch that you're trying to move. So this is going to be, well, maybe a little weak, but if worse comes to worse, we'll double it, and that way we know it's going to work. So I'm using one wire, and I'm going to wire these two branches, this one and this one, or the trunk and the branch, that are about the same thickness, okay? And what I do is anchor the wire on one trunk, and then I'll bring it up to the other. So the two sides have to be anchored. Once they're both anchored, then you can start to go to the end of one of these trunks. So here, I'm going to the end of the trunk, or to the end of this branch here. Every time you make a spiral, it should be about a 60-degree angle, and every time you make a spiral, you hold it over the wood with your between your thumb and your index finger, so that there won't be any space between the wire and the branch. Okay, so now we'll remove this. We'll cut the end that's sticking out a bit, and the other side we'll do the same thing. We're just going up slowly toward the top at about a 60-degree angle, And you're trying to go between needles, especially between branches, so the wire doesn't crush them against the trunk. So you have to be careful when you're doing it. We have to make room for the wire. There we go. Okay, so now we've gotten to the top of this one here. Now we cut off the excess up here. Okay, so now what we're going to do is wire all the side branches, and we'll wire the side branches. Now we're starting at the bottom and gradually wiring upwards. So we're starting at the bottom branches. This little baby here, this little branch, is important to fill in the bottom. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to anchor a wire right on this gin here. Gins are great places to anchor the wire, and we'll be able to wire it in place. I'm just removing some more bark here that I missed. I see it. There was so many dead branches in there that I didn't even see it before. Okay, so we'll grab some number 16 wire. This is 16, and we'll wire this. Again, use a wire that's about 1/3 the thickness of the branch you want to move. So I'm going to go over the top because I want to bring this branch slightly downwards. Whoops. Here we go. Now I anchor the wire on the gin, the little gin here. And when it's freshly made, you can even wire the gins. Okay, now we've got too much foliage here. I don't want to crush any. So we're going to, do I need it this long? No. So I'm going to remove a bit of the foliage here and go right to the end. Okay, so now the wire can be, the branch can be moved into place. I'm not going to do any secondary wiring yet. I'm doing all the main wiring. So this one is done, but to get the side branches out of the way, I will wire some of this branch downwards a bit here. So it's going to take a number, probably a 14 wire. So this is 14 here. 14 caliber. And we have to follow the other wire right to the end. Sorry. Just going to put it through here. Okay. Okay, so now we'll bring the wire around here. Okay, we're wiring to the end and at the tip of the branch. Sometimes if it's a very long branch and it gets narrower, you have to stop with one thickness of the wire and then go with it, and then go to the end with a thinner wire. But it's always, if you can get away with it, I think it's better to use the same wire. Okay, so here we're wiring two adjacent branches. Often you can, when you prune the tree, it looks so bare, and then after wiring it and fanning out the branches, the tree actually looks fuller than before it was pruned. So it's pretty paradoxical that you remove so much, and then at the end, it looks so much fuller than before you started. So, okay, we're not going to wire all the fine branches yet. We want to go up higher. Now I do have one here that I don't like. I kept it in case I needed a back branch, but I'm going to use this little one instead. So this branch will be taken off, and it'll also be ginned here. It's very low down, and it's not good to have, this is a back branch, and it's not good to have a first branch that's a back branch. So I think it's just best to remove it. So again, this gin is going to be on the back of the tree, so it's maybe won't be as visible, but still I think we're going to see parts. Yeah, we can see part of it from the front of our tree. The front of our tree, I think I'll mark it with a chopstick so that you guys will be able to see it. The front of our tree is going to be about here, okay? So now we're going to start by wiring this branch downwards, because we've got a big empty space in here. So we need to fill this space in here. So this is where this wiring downward will come into play. So again, I'm going to use a pretty thick wire, because at the base of this branch is pretty thick. So I'll use this, and okay. So now I have to come under this and over it like this, so I can bring this thick branch down. So in order to do that, I'm going to wire over here. Follow my other wire. You have to follow it, and it has to be parallel. So I'll bring it down here underneath, and finally anchor it on a gin in the back. It's the gin we just made. Okay, so here we go. Now I want the wire to go over this branch so I can bring it down. So here it is, we're over the top, and we've got 2 layers of foliage here. I don't think we need both, so we're going to remove a bit here. And we'll wire the 2 side branches downwards. We'll need some 16 wire here, so you'll see what it's going to look like. There we go. Now this side over here, just want to cut off a little knob there. Okay. Now this side branch. Just cutting off some little dead ends so that I can get in there with my wire, not crush anything. Okay, so we cut and we cut, and most of the time I prefer to wire conifers in the fall because they're much more flexible then, but I think we can get away with it. We're not quite in the fall yet, but we can get away with it. Now what I'm doing is I'm lowering the branch to fill in the empty spaces. Okay, so now we're working our way up. We're going to go from this branch here, the back one, to another back branch up here. So let me get some more wire. Now we always want to wire 2 branches of about the same diameter, the same girth. So in this case, these 2 are about the same, and we should be able to do them together. So I'm going to use a number 16 wire here, and we're going to go up to the top. Wiring is not difficult once you've mastered it. You just have to try not to cross your wires. Never cross the wires. And also, always the same spiral, always about a 60-degree angle. So if you can manage to do that, you'll be able to wire pretty well. So we cut here, and now we'll wire the other back branch, which is right here. Now we've got a little bit too much foliage in here also, so we have to clear some out so that the wire will get through in there. You want to cut off anything growing straight up and anything straight down. Leave the side branches, and if there's too many side branches, cut off any branches that are if they're opposite, remove one of the two opposite branches. Well, we're getting up toward the top now. Now we're going to wire this nice side branch over here. So we're actually going to wire these two together. And again, a number 16 caliber copper wire should do the trick. And cut here, and this is going to be our side branch. It's a bit long and it's very full, so we're going to have to thin it out again. If it's too long, we can always cut it back. I'll cut it back a little bit here. Okay, so now we're going to wire it to the end. Okay, so this branch is wired here. Now we're going to start wiring some of the top. We do have a front branch. It's sort of weak, but now that it's going to get some light, it'll really grow well. The top is too straight, so we're going to have to bend it and also turn it so that we get foliage on every side. So okay. Now we're going to wire some of the smaller branches. Here we go. I'm just wiring this secondary branch to get it out of the way because it's in the way for placing the one next to it, and it's just cumbersome. So I'm just getting it out of the way by wiring the side branch. It'll permit me to just place it out of the way. Okay, so now we'll be able to wire this little front branch here, and we'll wire some of the upper ones. This is a little thick for this one, so we're going to go down to a 20. This is really, we're getting thin. I have wire going to about 22 caliper, which is pretty fine. It's about the thickness of a human hair, but 20 is it holds pretty well. Okay, so working our way up the trunk. Now we're wiring much smaller branches, but they still are main branches because they're coming out of our main trunk. So it's very important to get all of them done before we start doing side branches. Okay, now we're going to be doing this front branch here near the top. The top has to be much fuller. The top has to really be spread out and look almost like a beret. So we are going to be keeping as many branches as we can. Wiring some of the other fine branches up near the top. It's just going from one to the next to the next. So now we've got a few more up here that have to be brought down. Maybe we've got a few too many. I think I'm going to remove a very strong one here. There we go. And remove, this is too much and this is, there we go. So the others will use all of them. So now just some very fine wire. The very fine wire is 22, and the branches are very thin, so we're going to use that size 22. It's fine, but it'll hold the fine branches in place. I'm doubling up on some of this wire because we've run out of some branches near the bottom. But I just discovered one that I didn't wire, so I'll use this one also. It has to be placed. We always have to make a full turn between two branches because otherwise the branches will seesaw up and down, and the wire isn't anchored, so they move up and down. So I wanted to wire two branches together, but it's not going to work. So again, I'll anchor higher up and cut it, and then attach this one to a lower branch. By the time you get to the end, it's a lot of detail wiring. I don't know if I'm going to wire all the fine branches today. Sometimes I wait and do it later on in the year, but at least to bonk out the main shape of the tree, it's really important to have to wire all the main branches. Have the main branches wired. Okay, so now we're going to bend some of them and fill in some empty spaces and make the tree look more elegant by giving the tree some beautiful curves. And if there's any small branches that are really sticking out like a sore thumb, then we're going to wire them. There's a couple here that are sticking out, so we're going to have to wire those down. The side branches are important that they be wired down to form a nice foliage pad. I'm trying to push the wire between the needles as I'm going along so that I don't even crush the needles. Very fine wire, it's almost invisible, but it's doing a fine job of placing the branches. Copper wire is great for wiring trees for shows because it doesn't show too much. So it is important that, yeah, you can get annealed copper wire from any bonsai supply house. You're sure to find it. If not, you can buy bare copper wire and put it on the barbecue for about just for about 15 minutes until it starts to glow red a bit, and then remove it quickly. You can cool it off in some cold water, and it should be ready for use after that. If you don't want to go to all that trouble, as I said, you can just order it from bonsai supply houses. Now we'll wire this one. This is going to be a back branch. It's not very attractive right now, but it's alive and it'll bud out. So we'll wire this back branch here to another one, and to get it down, to get it into the right position. And then I think, we have this one also to wire here. And then I think most of the shape will be, it'll be evident to you. Next branch is this one. So we're going to use a little bit of, I think 18. The 18 is right here. So we'll grab some of this. As I say, it's not a very attractive branch. It's pretty bare. It doesn't have much foliage, but now that we've opened the tree up to the light, it should bud back very, very well. So I don't worry about it at all. These branches down below were so shaded out by the upper branches and by all of the dead foliage inside that it's normal that they lost needles, but they have enough living needles to keep them alive. So now we have one last one to wire on this branch. It's this one. Again, it's sticking out, and we're going to go from that one to this one. So we'll need a thicker wire, so we're going to use some 16 here. This branch also needs to come down a bit because it's too parallel, so we will bring it down. Okay, we've got one branch left here, and then we're going to be pretty well on our way to finishing the tree. This gin here is sticking up too much, so we have some copper on it, so we can actually, it's fresh wood, so it's still flexible, it's still pliable, so we can bring it down with our copper wire, and when it dries it'll stay in that position. This branch is too straight, so we'll try to bend it. There we go. Generally, we don't repot them at the same time as we wire them, but I can slide it into a little pot to show you what it'll look like once it's made. You'll have to give me a minute to go and find a pot for it, but if you want to see the end result, we can show it to you and see what you think of it. I went up into my pot warehouse and chose a few potential pots for this tree. Now, I'm not going to do a full repotting today. It's not really the time to do it. Best time is always early spring. If not, I would do it in mid-September, but then I couldn't let it freeze during the winter. So we're just going to slide it into a pot to give you an idea of what the final result is going to look like. This pot here is way too large. Our tree looks lost in it. It's a beautiful tokoname container, but it's just too big for the tree. So we're going to take it out and say niet to that pot. Now, there's two other pots that I brought down. They're much too deep for this tree actually, but because I don't want to cut many lower roots, I'm going to slide it into one of these two pots. You put the tree in front of the pot to get an idea of what it's going to look like. This one here is a little formal for the tree, and it's very deep. Let's look at the other one. Neither one of them, of course, are ideal because, as I say, they're too thick. I think this one is our best bet. This one here is an antique Chinese container. Some nice calligraphy on the front, all handmade. So we're going to try it in the pot. It's a little bit too wide, so I'm going to have to take some soil off the edges here. Again, I don't want to remove too much soil. I don't want to jeopardize its survival. It's a nice little tree that survived many, many years, and you know, it's not worth it repotting it at the wrong time of year to see it die. So, especially not after having worked on it for a couple of hours. We're just removing some soil here, and we're going to put it in the pot. Always plant them off center. Always plant it off center in the pot. Now let's look, see what it looks like. That's sort of interesting. And we'll put, it's a little bit too low in the pot. I actually did choose one that's too deep, which I didn't think I could do because I didn't want to remove too much soil. So here, we have to put the nabari, the base of the trunk, where you can see the roots. It has to stick out a little bit so you can see where the trunk begins. This is called the nabari, where you can see the main roots. And we're just going to put a little bit of sphagnum moss around it to keep it moist while I show it to you. And we'll put some green moss on the top so that you can see the finished result. Now again, this is not a formal repotting. After this YouTube, I'm going to put it back in its nursery container and wait until spring to repot it. We'll get some moss. We'll moss it up. Again, it's a very quick mossing. If I'm getting a tree ready for a show, I go and collect many different species and varieties of moss, both from my bonsai and from the wild, so that I'll have a really interesting soil surface. We're not doing that, where this moss is all from the same location, but we want to give you an idea of what the finished bonsai will look like. So, get it angled at the right angle here. Try to expose the base of the trunk that's right here and get it properly angled. We want it slightly slanting here. And I think voila, that's the finished result. So you can see what our future bonsai will look like now. Again, it's freshly made, so it still has a lot of growing to do during its lifetime. But I think it shows great promise, shows great potential. It's a nice little trunk. It's got all the branches in the right place, and it's a very short-needled variety of dwarf spruce. It's called, again, it's a Norway spruce called Little Gem, and the needles look remarkably like dwarf Ezo spruce, which comes from Japan. So it can be used as a substitute for dwarf Ezo spruce bonsai. They're especially effective on rock plantings and as shohin bonsai, as dwarf-size bonsai. So it was certainly worth working with this material today. I enjoyed it. I hope you did, and I hope to see you again in the near future. I'll be showing you more demonstrations of how to transform trees into bonsai. Thanks a lot for now, folks. Bye.